Again, welcome to paper number 12, Research, Consultancy, and Advisory. I am your lecturer today, Professor Evans Vidija Sagwa from Manifested Publishers, and we are continuing with our third topic. Today we are looking at 3.2, Tests of Hypothesis, where we are looking at basic concepts concerning testing of hypothesis, procedure for hypothesis testing, type 1, type 2 errors, tests of significance, and the other subtopics. We are going to look at the basic concepts concerning testing of hypothesis. And when we talk about hypothesis testing, it is a statistical method used to determine if a hypothesis about a population parameter is true or not. It involves collecting sample data, calculating a test statistic, and comparing it to a critical value or p-value. The key concepts in testing of hypotheses include: 1, hypothesis. This is a statement about a population parameter. It may be null hypothesis, HO, a statement of no effect or no difference, or it may be alternative hypothesis, H1, a statement that contradicts the null hypothesis. So the null and the alternative will be talking about the same hypothesis, but from two different angles. The null one talks about no effect or no difference. The alternative talks about the contrary or contradicts the null hypothesis. The second key concept regarding testing of hypothesis is test statistic. This is a value calculated from sample data to evaluate the null hypothesis. Common test statistics include T statistic, Z statistic, F statistic, chi-square statistic, which we shall be looking at in the talk today. Third aspect that is a basic concept concerning testing of hypothesis is significance level. Sometimes it is called alpha. The probability of rejecting a true null hypothesis. A common significance level is 0.05. 4, critical value. This is a value that separates the rejection region from the non-rejection region. It depends on the significance level and the distribution of the test statistic. 5, p-value. This is the probability of obtaining a test statistic as extreme or more extreme than observed one, assuming the null hypothesis is true. If the p-value is less than significance level, the null hypothesis is rejected. What are the steps in hypothesis testing? So the steps are: number 1, state the null and alternative hypothesis. 2, choose a significance level. 3, determine the appropriate test statistic and its distribution. 4, calculate the test statistic. 5, find the critical value or p-value. 6, make a decision, reject or fail to reject the null hypothesis. 7, interpret the results. So these are steps in hypothesis testing, which will start with step 1, state the null and alternative hypothesis. Step 2, choose a significance level. Step 3, determine the appropriate test statistic and its distribution. Step 4, calculate the test statistic. Step 5, find the critical value or p-value. Step 6, make a decision, that is, reject or fail to reject the null hypothesis. Step 7, interpret the results. We mentioned types of errors when it comes to the aspect of testing of hypotheses. So we have 2 types. So type 1 error, this is where the null hypothesis is rejecting a true null hypothesis, whereas the null hypothesis is true is rejected. So that is type 1 error. Type 2 error, failing to reject a false null hypothesis. And a null hypothesis is false, but the researcher fails to reject it based on the findings that have been arrived at in terms of the testing. So that is the type 2 error, failing to reject a false null hypothesis. So type 1 error, rejecting a true null hypothesis. Type 2 error, failing to reject a false null hypothesis. We shall be looking at this in the subsequent areas of this topic. What are the common hypothesis tests? What are the common hypothesis tests? So you have 1, a t-test. This is used to compare means of 2 samples. You have sample X, you have sample Y. So you do a t-test to compare the means of those 2 samples. Z-test, used for large samples or known population standard deviation, known population standard deviation. And then you have ANOVA, that is analysis of variance. This is used to compare means of multiple groups. So if you have several groups in terms of the variables being tested, then you are looking at comparing the means of multiple groups. Then chi-square test, this is used for categorical data. So common hypothesis tests, t-tests, used to compare means of 2 samples. Z-test, used for large samples or known population standard deviation. ANOVA, that is analysis of variance, used to compare means of multiple groups. Chi-square test, used for categorical data.